The gospel reading for today has one of the most well-known comments made by Jesus. You've probably heard it. Give to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and give to God the things that are God's. And that proof text has been used through centuries to say that you separate the church and the state. But that's not what it's about. And we need to know, and we need to remember just exactly what was happening when this was said. If you recall, Jesus came into Jerusalem, and he went to the temple. And the second time he went, he was so disgusted that he created chaos. He turned over the money changers' tables and kicked out the cattle and the birds and everything, because he said, "This is my Lord's house of prayer." And he had the courage to come back. And when he came back, he began to teach. And in that, the people, the leaders of Jerusalem, the leaders of the religion, started challenging him. And because of that challenge, he gave us 3 parables, which we have heard over the last 3 weeks. The first one, if you recall, was the story of the 2 sons. The one son said, after his father asked him to do something, "No, I won't do it," but he went back and did it. And the other son said, "Yes, I will," and didn't. The second son, or the second parable, Jesus told the parable of the vineyard, where the landowner created a vineyard, gave it to tenants to take care of, and then when the produce came in, the fruit came in, they did not want to share it, although it was the landlord's vineyard. And the third parable was last week, when the king went to his subjects and they would not come to his banquet. So he opened that banquet to everyone, anyone who wanted to come, whether good or bad, as it said. Well, there was a fine line that was going through all of those 3 parables, and that line is, who has the authority? And that is what Jesus was challenging the leaders in Jerusalem, asking them, who has the authority? They thought they did. And through those parables, he was indicating to them that God is the authority. God tells us what to do. God is the one who we are to be obedient to. God is what life is all about. Well, because of that, those leaders wanted to get Jesus in trouble. And so they posed this question to him. And they didn't even have the courage to pose it themselves. They sent their lackeys to do it. And the question was put in such a way they were hoping for a yes or no. And if Jesus says, yes, it is lawful to give taxes to Caesar, then you'd get the people upset. Because in Matthew, that tax was a census tax. Every adult had to pay 1 day's wages every year to the conquering people. And of course, you can imagine how happy they were to pay that. About as happy as we are to pay our taxes. And so, with that, if he said no, then he would have the heat of Rome on him for being critical of Rome, and he couldn't win. But there was something else that was going on, and again, it has to do with authority. He said, show me a coin. And they pulled out a coin and showed it to him. And on that coin was the picture of Tiberius. Now, not much different than us. You know, we've got Lincoln on the penny, and we have Roosevelt on the dime, and we have Jefferson on the nickel, if I still remember them all correctly. And so they had the picture of Tiberius on it. But that coin also said Tiberius Emperor, son of Augustus Emperor, the high priest. Now in the Jewish religion, it was heresy to have anything on your presence in your house or whatever that substantiated idolatry. And here they had a coin from Rome that said Tiberius was God. And yet they carried it on him. So he was challenging them, and he said to them then, give to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and give to God the things that are God's. The question is, and it posed for them and for us today, what are the things that we're talking about? And who gets them? Now for us, we have a democratic society, not someone who has come to conquer us. And in that democratic society, we might say to ourselves, how do we respond to the government? What are the things of the government? And how do we respond to God? What are the things of God? Well, through my whole life, and I am a cradle Lutheran, I have always heard, of course, that everything belongs to God. And I have no problem with that. But as I reflect on my life, and I was about 8 years old when World War II ended, and as I've reflected on what came out of the church and what came out of the pulpit, I never heard anything about women's rights. And you know that was an issue after Rosie the Riveter and World War II. I never heard much, if anything, about prayer in the school. I never heard anything about civil rights. And that was because I was told, or subconsciously told, there's a separation between the church and the state. And we deal in spiritual and we deal in religious matters. We don't deal in government matters. Well, I don't believe that. And our church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, is changing. There are social statements that come out. There are things that we need to wrestle with. There are issues that are going on today that affect all of us. And we have to ask ourselves, what are the things that belong to the state and what are the things that belong to God? And we all think differently. I know that. I, if you didn't know, was at Occupy Johnson City yesterday. I didn't see any of you there. It's all right. We're all different. We all look at things differently. One of the reasons I was there yesterday is I remembered the civil rights, and I was nowhere. And it wasn't going to happen again. But there are issues going on in this world, and there are issues going on in this country. There's polarization of our government. I saw a chart, a pie chart, just last week, that showed that the government spending is over 50% for Afghanistan and Iraq. Is that what Christ would want for us? Is that how we would look? And I keep that as an open question because I can't answer that for you. I also saw a chart of the relationship between top management and the average worker. 10 of them. At the top of the list was Japan. 11 times the average worker was top management. The second to the last Was Venezuela a dictatorship? 50 times. You know who the last was? 474 times the average worker's wage. Is that what God calls us to be part of? Is that what we're supposed to be? Now, I'm not trying to do any revolution or anything. All I'm trying to say to all of you is, where are we? What is our relationship to all this? What is God asking us to do as His disciples? If we are. To begin with, read the Sermon on the Mount. Read also that Jesus is always with the marginalized. Read about giving to the poor. Read about Jesus' life and what He's all about, and then ask, is that what He's calling us to do and to be? I can't answer that for anyone else. But I think, and I thought it was ironical or coincidental, that this came up the Sunday in which the headlines in the Johnson City Press are talking about occupied whatever, and it's all over the world. You know, the kingdom of God is drawing near. The reign of God is drawing near with Jesus. He declared that. And wherever Jesus is, the reign of God is coming. The interesting thing is God doesn't need us. I don't know if you've ever thought about that. If God is all-powerful and omniscient and everything, He doesn't need us. But He sure would like us to have Him. So we all need to think about what our responsibilities are, what our concerns are, what God might be calling us to do and to be, maybe very little. But I would sure like for us to remember that we give to the state. Things are the state's, but we give to God the things that are God's. And leave you with this comment from the ELCA. It is God's work, but it is our hands.